Hello everyone, in this video we're going to look at how we can define a method and then invoke that method in our program. So what we're going to do is write a method called max. Max is going to accept two ints as parameters and then it's going to return the larger of the two parameters. And then we're also going to have a main method to test this method that we've just written. So in Eclipse I've created a new project called testMax and we're going to add a class to this which is also going to be called testMax. And we'll get Eclipse to create a main method for us. So the first thing we're going to do is actually write our method. Now in Java, a method contains the following things. So it contains some modifiers. These are things like visibility, whether it's public or private or protected. Whether it's a static method or not. So this one's optional. It's either a static method or a member method. Then we have a return type. Then the name. So the name of the method. And then a parameter list. And then finally we have the block of code that defines the method. So there's a lot that a method actually has. But all of the methods always look like this. Now, the important thing from this is that the combination of the modifiers, the name, the return type, and the parameters, this is known as the method signature. Okay, so that's how we identify a method. So back over into our program now, let's define our max method. So this is going to be a public method, which means that any class or any piece of code can call this method. And it's going to be a static method, which means that this method belongs to this class. And there's only one of this method for all instances of the class. We need our return type. Now, this is going to return the maximum of 2 ints. So the return type is going to be an int as well. And then the name of the method is going to be called max. And it's going to accept 2 ints as parameters. So int number1, comma int number2. So we're defining a method called max. It accepts 2 ints as parameters and returns an int. They're the main things that we have to worry about in this video, not so much the modifiers. So what are we going to do inside this method? Well, we're going to define an int called result. And we're not going to give it a value yet. We're just going to define this variable. Now, if number1 is greater than number2, we're going to make result equal to number1, which makes sense. We're returning the larger of the two integers. Otherwise, result equals number2. And then finally, we're going to return a result. Now, the return is kind of important. This is where the value gets returned back to the caller of our method. So we want to return back the maximum of these two numbers. So we do this with the return keyword. Now, note here that if the two numbers are equal, it doesn't matter which one we've returned. So we've just decided to return num2 in that case, because it doesn't matter. So that's it for that method. That's the entire method. Now what we're going to do is test this method. Testing our code is really important. So we're going to have a main method. Now we're going to have an int called I, which is going to be equal to 5. I can write 5, and int j, which we're going to set equal to 2. And finally, int k. This is where we're going to call our method. And the way we do that is really easy. It's just with the name of the method and then the parameters which we're passing into it. And we're going to pass in I and j as its parameters, which makes perfect sense. Our max method expects 2 integers as its parameters, and it just happens that I and j are integers, so we can pass them in without any problems. So, and we're storing the result, so max will return a number, which then we're storing as k. So whatever max returns is what k gets assigned to. So, next thing we're going to do is system.out.println the maximum of I need a plus sign, plus string, and need a space here, plus j is plus k. So the maximum of I and j is, I've got two plus signs there, which I don't need, but that's okay. So that's enough to be able to test our method. So let's just shrink this back down, make a little bit more room, and let's run this program now. So run as Java application. The maximum of 5 and 2 is 5. So what does this tell us? This tells us that k definitely did get assigned to the result of this method, and we really did return the maximum of these two numbers. So in this case, we returned the first number here, number 1. If we swap these around, j and I, and run this again, we still get the answer 5, because in this case, number 2 was greater than number 1, so we returned this. And really, that's all there is to it. Now, just to prove that the return type really does do what I said it does, let's make this equal to 66 and run this again. The maximum of 5 and 2 is 66. See, we didn't even use this result anymore. We just returned a number at the end of our method, which is fine, but it doesn't actually do what our method says it's going to do anymore. So let's put that back to result. So with that, that's really all there is to this video. So what did we do? Well, we created a method. Now, methods begin with the method signature, which includes the modifiers, whether it's publicly visible or privately visible or whatever, and whether it's a static variable, and then, whether it's a static method, and then the return type for the method, in our case it was an int, then the name of the method, what the method's called, and then the parameter list, which is just a list of parameters in parentheses. And we use return to return data back to the caller. So that's how we would define the max method. So that's it for this video. Thanks.